Well,
can you tell me what we're standing in front of here?
Well, this right here is a display of the beginnings of the farming, when the land over there, the Glatt land that we started farming on, when it was homesteaded, and it was homesteaded in 1887 by her grandpa, and of course we put a lot of work into it to bring it to the present day, what's there now. And there's pictures, buildings that a replica of the old sod house, the old schoolhouse that I went to, or she did too, and then of course a replica of the house that is there at the present time, plus the barn and the old sod house, and of course the old first wooden house that was on the place. And of course a lot of horse-drawn equipment like a grass mower and a drill and the old buggy that people used and whatever, and then finally up into some of the newer equipment and the Holsteins that we used to milk and the old cars, that we drove. I had this all on display down at the fire hall in Strasbourg for the centennial. As a matter of fact, I built some of the buildings for the centennial. They're not all here. I built the Hague elevator. I built a replica of the Hague store, but there's not enough room here to display it all, so it's not in here. And then I had the display down at the fire hall. I started out with the horses way back in the 30s, when everything was done with horses. I had the plows and the drills and the buildings, and of course continued all up to the present day to our son's house that is there now, and the full modern equipment, the combines and everything else.
And Kitty, can you tell me which parents of yours homesteaded? Who was this, or grandparents?
It was the parents on my father's side. It was Michael and Catherine Faith Glatt. They homesteaded it in 1887, and then my father, Lambert, he was the second youngest of the boys, and so when my grandfather died in 1950, and my grandmother died in 1931, and so they took over the farm from then on. And eventually my father, he got some, from the parents when it was divided up amongst the family, and then he bought some of the surrounding land and started farming.
Did you know your grandparents?
No, I didn't, because I was born in 1930, and that was when my grandmother. I was about a year old when my grandmother passed away, and my grandfather, of course, had died earlier already. So no, I never knew that.
What was your father like?
Oh, plain, simple, hardworking, very kind person.
What was your relationship like with him?
I would work in the fields, with my dad, plowing and mowing hay and just whatever was to be done. I always worked with him.
I suppose as an only child, your mother also would help out on the farm a lot, doing the chores too.
Yeah, she did. She did too.
She couldn't just stay in the house.
No. It, of course, was family, worked together like all the families at that time. So.
Yeah. I asked your husband this, but was your mom a good cook as well?
Oh yeah. I think at that time they were all good cooks. They all made meals out of flour and dough, and of course the butchering they did at that time, and the gardens and whatever they had. But
I had somebody tell me that the reason the food was so good is because you were just so hungry.
Well,
That, or do you think it was just good?
Well, it was good, but you had appetite because you worked hard and you worked all day, and and you just got the 3 meals. Of course, there was always lunch, you know. When we thrashed, there was always lunch. Everybody, wherever you thrashed, they always had lunch, between the meals. And those thrashing days, there was a lot of people together, There was, the thrash, the tractor operator, the thrashing machine operator, and then, of course, there was maybe 6 or 7 bundle wagons, so there was one in each wagon to pitch the bundles or haul bundles or pitch the stacks. And of course then you had to have a grain hauler to haul the wheat off, and so there was a big group, and they had to cook for a lot of people. So there was big meals and always good meals, yeah.
We can see what the outside of these buildings look like, but can you explain to me what the inside of the sod house would look, how many rooms there were, what they were used for?
Well, there wasn't a lot of rooms, Usually the kitchen and maybe part of a living room, and then a couple of bedrooms, They weren't big. There wasn't a lot of room, And some added to the back, some of them. But there was all big families, and so you slept together. There was attic up there where it was low, but there's usually some beds up there. The boys would crawl up there and sleep up there, and but they weren't big, So you slept together, You were 2, 3, 4 in a bed, It just wasn't like it is today. Everybody has to have their own room. It was different, but the families got along and it all worked out. Yeah.
How long was this sod house used? Who all would have lived in it?
Well, it was used. It was quite a while. When did Mike Feist move off? No, they didn't live there anymore when he. So it was used up until to the late. Maybe early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, it was still lived in, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Katie, this would have been the house you lived in then? Would it have been the sod house one or not?
No.
Well, no.
In this house, in the second house.
See,
My dad lived.
the sod house was on the land that was first homesteaded, see. And her dad started farming in a different quarter, which wasn't homesteaded, but it was bought by the family, see. So there was just 2 quarters that were homesteaded, and this house was on the first homesteaded land. See, but it's all still in the family. See, it was added by the time when we took when we got to the farm. Her dad had 880 acres, and then when we left the farm, it was 1,800 acres. See, and now since then, the son owns it. He's farming. He owns over 2,000 acres, or close to 2,500. 2,500, yeah.
So is the sod house still there, or has it been torn down?
No, it's torn down. Yeah, it's been torn down. As a matter of fact, your dad tore it down. Yeah, he tore it down and used some of the wood to put a little machine shed on the home place and a hog barn, yeah. So
he just reused it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was kind of a common practice of this group to reuse.
See what they did later on. It wasn't sod outside anymore. See, towards the end, later on, the sod started deteriorating. So they put a wooden wall around it. See, and so it was then moved. They cut it in half and moved it down to the other farm, made a machine shed out of one and a hog barn out of the other half.
Do you know about when that would have happened? Roughly?
That was before we were married, because I remember helping him tear it down.
Yeah.
It must have been in the late 40s.
We got married in 52, so it happened a little before there, yeah.
Okay. And then the house on the bottom right is the one you two lived in? Were
Yeah.
married and had how many children in this house?
Oh, what was it?
Must have been at least.
We had 4 of them when we lived up there yet, before we moved down into that one.
And What was the layout of that house?
Small kitchen, living room, one bedroom to the back, and then a washroom on the other end off the kitchen. It was pretty small.
So there was one bedroom for you two and your 4 children. You all slept in the same room?
No, the
children
kids slipped out on a couch, or we had some other. Of course, some of the little ones, there was a baby
the
bed,
crib and
it's in the
stuff.
crib and whatever. So
They
they're all
had
close
here.
together, So they were. So yeah, I know Jody and slept on the couch, and probably one of the other ones. I don't remember exactly how, but.
She fell off and got a broken shoulder from sleeping on the couch.
About when was that house built?
Well, there's a little story about that. Her uncle built that house on a farm where Pete Glatt started farming later. Her uncle Mike I think he built the house there maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, when her dad started farming, he bought this house and moved it over to the original farm where we started farming. They had a big family, so they built a new house, a bigger house. And her dad bought that and moved it over, and that's where they lived in until they quit and moved to town into that house. And then we lived there until we moved the other house out from town. And then we came over here and built this one after we retired in '92.
Retired and built another house? And then what is this building next to the sod house?
A chicken barn. Most farms had a chicken barn like that, even though on her place there wasn't one like that. But a lot of the farms had a chicken barn like that, yeah.
And then this school district number 3 house, that's the one you went?
That's the one, Exeter District. No, it just says school, yeah. It's a replica of all the schools looked alike around here, yeah. So there was the type of school I went to, and of course she attended this school for how many years? The first 7?
For the sixth grades, I went to country school, and then I went to town school.
She started going to town school.
So you guys did you guys go to the same country school?
No.
And how long did you go to school then?
I went through Hague High School and 1 year college down at Aberdeen, South Dakota.
Okay. So, did you do the high school teaching?
No.
I'm sorry, K-8 teaching, like several?
No,
she
I
never
never did
did.
any teaching.
Okay. You guys met before then?
Yeah, we had met before then.
Where'd you guys meet?
At a dance, I suppose. I don't remember.
Yeah, it
At that time, there was a lot of dances.
Dance every Friday night in Strasbourg, and then there's between that there's one at Hague, Sealand, or there was every Friday night there was a dance somewhere, and then all these wedding dances. You go to dances several times a week if you wanted to. So
Probably one of those is when you guys met.
yeah, must be one of those. I don't
Same
exactly.
Sooner or later met, I guess. I don't know.
Don't exactly. Well, we met at one of those dances or whatever. And of course you dance with all the girls, and of course you dance and get familiar and more and whatever. And that's how it starts, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your wedding like?
It was
Like
health.
all old-fashioned weddings.
It
Mass at 10 o'clock in the morning, and chicken noodle dinner,
Soup.
soup for dinner, and actually we were married in the Hague Church, and then we came over here to Strasbourg. Madeline's Blue Room at that time is where we had our dance and dinners and everything.
Of course, it went all day. It started, like, say, Mass at 10, and then after Mass you come over and then have a soup dinner and with all the trimmings, and then you dance until supper time. Then you'd have a big supper with the sausage and the chickens, fried chicken or whatever. And then after that, you'd dance again until midnight or 1 o'clock. So it was a long day.
Yours didn't go a second day, like
No,
some people say
no,
just one day? Did you guys take a honeymoon at all?
later on in the fall, not right away.
No,
What did you do
there's,
for your honeymoon?
We went out west. My parents, some of my dad's brothers and sisters had moved into Montana and into Washington. He had never gotten out that way. And so we took them out there through Yellowstone Park.
so yeah, we're probably
With your
gone.
parents?
Probably, yeah. So it wasn't alone. But we were gone, what, about 3 weeks?
No,
2 weeks. 2 weeks for sure.
maybe even that long.
Oh yeah,
10
it
days,
was more than 10 days, I think. As on the way home, we went through the Yellowstone Park, and so that's the first
We got
time.
married on July 8th, which was a busy time.
So there was harvest and stuff
Harvesting
going
and
on.
haying
So
and
yeah,
whatever, so we only went probably in September, I think we must have went out west.
probably because when we coming back, I know when we went through through the Yellowstone Park, we didn't have snow. By the time we got into North Dakota, we had snow already. So, yeah, but it was first trip west. It was nice, we were out there quite a while. We went all the way. I went to Seattle and spent some time in Billings. There was some of her uncles in Billings, and then we went to Washington. There was some in
Yakima and Spokane.
and Prosser. There was one in Prosser. One is in another place, and then we went up to Seattle. Spend some time up there. So we were gone. I think a thing or 2 weeks. Yeah.
Why don't you guys go ahead and tell me what farming was like?
Well, of course, back in the days, when I was young, like I said earlier, I plowed with a couple of horses, and for a couple of years, and then, of course, we got into tractors. But anyway, the harvesting was done with a header when I was a kid. And the first couple of years, I was maybe 5, 6 years old, and then I would drive the horses in front of the grain box, where the wheat was headed on to. And of course, the header was pulled by 4 horses, and then the box was pulled by 2. And so you'd go around the field until the box was full, and then you'd unload in the middle of the field. While the first box was unloading, the other one was filling up. They were filling the other box up, and that's how they changed off until the field was done and whatever. And you'd always put 2 stacks side by side, so you pull a thrashing machine in, and you'd pitch those stacks through the thrashing machine to get the wheat out of the straw. So this is how we harvested. And later on, we had a little Ford tractor, and so we didn't use horses anymore. And we had the little Ford tractor in the front, and I would run that little tractor. But the horses were still on the boxes. And of course, the thrashing was you'd have a thrashing machine. You'd pull that in between the 2 stacks you made with the header that you did with the header, and then you'd pitch the grain through the thrashing machine. And then of course bundles. There was a lot of the grain was bindered, and usually those stacks you would do at home in the yard, so the cattle could get around it. Of course, you'd have to haul all these bundles, go out the field, load up the bundles, haul them home. But usually, the fields weren't far away, so it was close. You'd have about 5, 6, depends on how big or how far it was to haul. You'd have bundle wagons. Each one would have a bundle wagon. Some use header boxes, some would use hay boxes. And you'd, of course, load them up in the field, and you'd drive home to the yard, and you'd pitch all these bundles through the thrashing machine. And you'd have a big straw pile at home in the yard for the cattle to get around during the winter, lay around.
How long would it take you to header all the grain and then later thrash it? How long would each of these processes take?
Well, of course, those days they didn't have a lot of acres, but it didn't go fast, either, so I don't really remember how many acres you could header in one day. It wasn't a lot, probably 20, 30 acres or so, because you had horses. At noon, you'd have to unhitch them and take them home. You'd have to give the horses a rest. Usually, they gave the horses an hour or hour and a half. Of course, during that time, you had lunch, and then you'd have to go back out. And at sundown, you'd quit. You wouldn't go beyond that. So you couldn't do a lot. Now the header was 10 feet, so it didn't cut a lot. And with the horses, it goes slow. You couldn't run them or anything. You had just to walk them. So you didn't get a lot done, maybe 20, 25 acres. I really don't remember just how many acres we did in a day. So, and then of course the thrashing went a little faster. You could thrash quite a bit. And those days, of course, there was no lights either. You'd still quit. You'd quit at noon, but you didn't have to give horses any rest because not a lot of rest. There wasn't this many. Well, especially in the pitching the stacks, there was no horses used. Maybe in the grain wagon to haul the grain away from the thrashing machine. That's the only time there was horses used while you're doing stacks. But then, of course, with the bundles, there was a lot of horses. You had a couple of horses in each bundle wagon, so you had to rest them.
Would neighbors get together to help harvest and thrash?
Well, the harvesting, no. The harvesting was up to the family, but the thrashing was done amongst the neighbors. A lot of times, 3, 4 farms would own the thrashing machines, and then they would do that as a group, yeah. But then later on, there was individuals that would own the thrashing machine, and they'd go from farm to farm, and he would be a custom operator, and he would hire his men to haul the bundles and pitch the stacks, yeah.
What was the impact of going from horses to tractor like for your family, for your neighbors?
Well, that was quite a change, I mean, you could do so much more, tractors, even though the first tractor my dad bought was a little case, pulled 2 bottoms. So he didn't get a lot done, but then later on, we only had that for a couple of years, and then he bought a bigger one that pulled 3 bottoms. And then, of course, I had grown up and was bigger, and then there was lights in that tractor, and so we would run the tractor 24 hours a day. I would run it during the day, and my brother would run it during the night, and then my dad would pitch in between, And so we could plow quite a bit when he went 24 hours a day, So things went a little faster, and of course we acquired more land, and so you needed bigger equipment. So like all the farms, they grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and lost some of the other ones. So.
And Katie, was your experience similar to Felix's for?
Pretty much so, yeah, I guess. I got in and driving the horses in the header box that I remember, and then of course when they started binding, I got in on a lot of shocking the bundles, putting them into little stacks. I did a lot of that. And other than that, I guess that far back, all I really got into was driving the horses on the header box and shocking the bundles.
Do you remember when your parents got a tractor?
Well, he had that
Not really,
DC4 was
we
his
had
first
the
tractor.
Case DC4, I guess it was. What year, I don't know.
Since you had
Late 30s, I suppose.
Since you had a smaller family, would you get together with the neighbors to harvest and do thrashing and that kind of
Yeah,
thing?
like you said, not the harvesting, but the thrashing.
yourself.
Yeah, oh yeah, thrashing. I think that was pretty much a custom, pretty much in the surrounding area, where the family farmers would get together for that, yeah.
About when could you begin to get the fields ready? Would that be like around April-ish, maybe?
Well, with horses, it depended on the weather, and how things were, but with horses, usually they went out, plowed a little earlier, It was cold sometimes. I know, you'd go out there and And a lot of times he'd get off the plow and walk along to get you stay warm. There was no protection of any kind, and so it was cold sometimes when they started, plowing and seeding, But towards last, towards when I had the tractor, and then they had what they call a comfort cap. It was just canvas along the side and kind of a windshield, and of course it helped a lot. But then you always wanted to drive into the wind. See, that way you had protection. Because if you drove from the wind, it'd blow in the back. See,
There was no flap in the back.
no, nothing in the back. Of course, and then when the caps came, that was quite a change.
And do you remember when tractors had the glass caps?
Well, I bought the 4020 John Deere. That was in, when was that? That had a cab on,
Yeah.
That was the first 60,
Early 60s.
60, it starts the late 60s, I think, 67, 68. That's when I bought the 4020 with a cab, yeah. Then it got really nice, even though it didn't have a heater.
It blocked the elements finally.
Yeah, right.
Did either of you ever have to miss school in order to help get the fields ready or for harvest or anything like that?
Well, of course, country school, you didn't have those months of school. See, we only had, what was it, about
7 months.
7 months of school, see. So it started later, and usually, now I never had to stay out of school, and then, of course, the thrashing was usually done later in the fall, especially stacks. The bundles were hauled in first because of the wetness or the snow, whatever. But a lot of times the stacks were thrashed, and when there was snow already, so you had to take the snow off the top of the stack, push the snow off, because a lot of times there was snow on the stacks already when the stacks were thrashed. Didn't happen all the time, but it did happen sometimes.
Now, you've mentioned a couple times the weather kind of being a pain with it cold. Did you have a winter jacket and gloves and all this winter clothing?
Oh yeah, there's good winter clothing, yeah. Oh yeah, no problem there.
Was it passed on from child to child, or did you get new stuff?
Well, they get new stuff, but a lot of it was passed on, yeah. A lot of it was passed on, yeah. Yeah, but there's, as far as clothing goes, no, there was good clothing. I mean, you dress, you'd be warm, you'd be out there in the snow playing all day when you were kids, and it really didn't bother, yeah. There was plenty of good clothes.
Now, did your parents buy the clothes, or did they make them?
Well, the coats and stuff like that, yeah, most of it was bought, I don't know, there wasn't a lot of, there's a lot of women that would sew dresses for their girls or whatever, no, but like pants and stuff for men, no, it was all bought, yeah.
It was basically bought, but I can remember, yeah. Okay. Probably do a lot of patchwork, and the jeans and whatever, but it was basically bought in my family, yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me what alcohol usage was like when you were growing up as a child?
Well, of course, the old red eye was kind of the thing. The weddings, they burned sugar. You'd burn some sugar to get it the right color, and then you'd add water and bring it to a boil and then mix it with alcohol. Now this stuff is I always mix it 3 to 1, 3 water to 1 alcohol. And then, of course, some of the older bottled beer cans, the first cans were made to look like a bottle, and it had a cap on, just like a bottle of beer. A bottle did. Then, of course, later on, they came out with a can that you opened with we always called it the church key. That's back there. Anyway, you had to open it, and that was how they did it then. And then, of course, came to self-tapping and whatever. But anyway, North Dakota had a brewery at one time. It started at Bismarck. I don't remember exactly what year they started, but anyway, it didn't go too long, and it went broke, and they couldn't sell enough, I guess, or whatever the trouble was. But anyway, they didn't last too long. I don't know exactly how many years, but I'd say not more than about 10 years, and then it went down.
Now you said with red eye you burn sugar. What exactly does that mean when you burn sugar?
Well, I take, usually when I make one bottle of alcohol, I use about 2.5 cups of sugar into a pan. You'd like a heavy bottom pan, otherwise it don't heat even and it'll burn so easy. So you want a heavy bottom kettle, you know, that will hold about 4 or 5 quarts of water. And I'd put it on the stove, not way hot, you know, and after, you can see after it starts melting, you have to keep stirring it and until you get it to the right brownness. And then I put in hot water and then bring it to a boil until it's all melted. And then, of course, I let it cool down, not way cold. And then I start mixing it 3-to-1. Three bottles of water, that's browned water, to a bottle of alcohol. Then you got red eye.
Okay. And a red eye is a German-Russian drink, but what's the history of it? Where did it come from?
I really don't.
When did they drink it?
Well, it's the time it's used, just weddings is the main use, but everybody had some. Those days, everybody had red eye at home. You know, you'd when you get company, you'd have a drink for them, or a lot of people used it as an appetizer before lunch or a dinner. You know, they'd use it, and but it was mainly used at weddings. You know, you didn't go to any wedding where there wasn't any red eye. It was always there, and and then another thing that my dad did a lot was make wine out of cherries. We always had cherry wine at home.
Do you remember how he made that?
Well, you pick the cherries and you put them in a big these earth crocks, you know, and he would let it in there so it would ferment, you know, whatever. And I don't know, I never made any, but anyway, at a certain time they would take it out, you know, and run it through something to get all the stones and everything out and bottle it. And a lot of times my dad would put it into a crock, you know, and a wooden crock, and and let it age, you know, whatever, and it's good wine. You know.
Now, some of this red eye making and alcohol making would have been done during Prohibition, correct? Was alcoholism a problem with German Russians, or was it more of a social thing?
Well, it was, I don't know, it was just something that the Germans, you know, there was always beer, you know, and it's just something that the Germans did. I suppose I don't know if they did it over in Russia or wherever, I don't know, but of course when they came over here, they were they were all making their own, you know. Of course, finally the government stopped it all, you know, so you couldn't make any, but it didn't stop them, you know. They was still made all over. It didn't run out of alcohol, not by a long shot. They continued making it and made their red eye, you know. And, once in a while, one guy got caught and they destroy his unit and have another one by whatever. They'd be right back at it.
Do you remember a specific story of anybody getting caught?
Not really, you know. Of course, by the time I was of age, you know, most of it wasn't going on anymore. You could buy it again, so there wasn't a lot of it done anymore. But there was some done, you know. Some just liked the home brewed stuff, you know, whatever. But it wasn't done a lot anymore by the time I grew up, you know. Everything was available again. So, but during the 30s, you know, when Prohibition, I mean, it didn't stop these people. They just did it anyway.
And as you were growing up, was the alcohol more, in your opinion, was it social, or did you see a lot of people getting drunk quite often?
Well, you didn't see it. The only time you would see it is when on weddings where some would get a little too much of it. It doesn't take a lot. You gotta limit yourself. But that's the only time. No, it wasn't. That was the only time it was used in parties. Those days, of course, we even did it. Yeah, but my dad, his namesday was January 17th, and I mean, it could snow, it could be 30 below, and we'd have people there, That was a house full, They'd come with horses and sled, and whatever. And John Schwab, they were good friends, my dad and John Schwab. He was one of the first big accordion players in Strasbourg. And he'd be there with his accordion and be sitting on the table and everybody be dancing, That was parties, everybody held their namesday. And that's where the red eye was used, a lot of it. Of course, they had beer, But that's where the red eye really come into play, and weddings.
I heard some people have a tradition at weddings for handing out red eye. Was there one when you were, how was the red eye distributed? When you were married or when...
Okay, today they probably wouldn't do this, but at our wedding or any other wedding, you didn't have any plastic shot glasses. So the guys that were dishing out, they had just one. Everybody drank out of the same one. So that was something that was probably different, but nobody bothered nobody, that's the only way they did it,
So there would be a couple guys dedicated to hand out the shots as people walked in?
2 or 3 guys, It was served all day, And, but you just had one shot glass and one bottle, and you'd wait till he's got it. You just, one shot, and he'd give you the glass bag, and you'd pour it for somebody else. Yeah, that's the way they did it.
And do you remember how the alcohol for red eye was made?
Well, of course, in my day, we could buy it already, see, but otherwise it was done with the still, early before you could buy it, or during the probation days, when when you couldn't buy the alcohol, and of course they made it themselves and mixed it, with the brown sugar.
Just made the homemade.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Now, the one bottle of beer that Cato, do you know about how old of beer that is?
Well, I really don't know. I don't remember it, but I still remember some of it, But this Cato, this was made by a small outfit in Mankato, Minnesota. See, there was a lot of small breweries, and there still is some small breweries, and it wasn't made by like Miller or whatever, but they had their own, and they had it in a. I never did find one like Budweiser or Miller or any of the others. Well, there was so many breweries, there was like I think 4 in Minneapolis, and in my day, probably one of the most popular beers was Hams. Everybody drank Hams, the Hams beer, and they had the nicest signs, beer signs. Hams was tops. They're the best one. There's a flowing one right there. Anyway, and then there was Grain Belt out of Minneapolis. Then there was, I think it was, there's 4. I don't remember just offhand now what the other ones were. But anyway, I just don't remember now. But anyway, there's 4, and they were popular. But the most popular in my day was Hams. That was top selling, yeah.
And this would have been probably getting into the mid-40s, late 40s?
Yeah. Of course, they were popular, a long time, but in the 50s, they were the top selling beer around, yeah. Hams, yeah. They were Hams, Grain Belt. Of course, you can still buy it, even though the breweries have been sold, and somebody else owns them. But they just, you can still buy hams, you can still buy grain belt, but it's not a popular. It's just a thing that there's probably, if Miller owns it, it's Miller beer in there, but you still have the hams can, or bottled. But it's not brewed especially as hams. So, yeah, the Dakota beer, like I said, they started in Bismarck, and it didn't last very long. I don't know, I just couldn't make a go of it, but they were operating, I don't know how many years, about 5-6 years or whatever. And then I think it's Miller. Yeah, Miller brought out a Dakota beer, and it didn't go over. They when they bring out a new beer, they test it in maybe 6-7 cities in the United States, and if it isn't a big seller, then they eliminate it again. Yeah, so that didn't go very long. And then this one here was brewed from a Minnesota company just for the Centennial, North Dakota Centennial. Just a souvenir bottle, really.
Those other bottles you have are probably from around the 50s.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah, the cans, yeah, and mostly, yeah. I'm going to get a glass here, and I want to show you.
So what glass is this?
This is in 76, I think we were over in Germany.
76.
And in at Munich, yeah, we stopped at Munich for a while. We were there all day. But anyway, we went through what they call the Hofbrauhaus. It's one of the bigger breweries in Germany. And anyway, I bought this as a souvenir. But anyway, we were in there most of the day. We had lunch in there, all the German meal. And anyway, when you ordered a beer, this is the glass you got it in. So it took you a while to drink it. But anyway, and over there, they don't cool their beer. Their beer is room temperature all the time. You never buy beer out of a refrigerator, it's all room temperature. And there's something different about it, and it really tastes good just at room temperature. But that's the only way you can buy it. Maybe some do it now, I don't know, but we were over there in 94, and it was still the same. You just bought your beer. Your beer's all room temperature, yeah, not cooled.
Now, do you remember if your dad drank warm beer, or any of your neighbors drank warm beer?
Well, the home brew was done. They had it in the cellar, My dad brewed beer, at home too. But there was no refrigerator, so you had to bring it up, and whatever temperature there was in the cellar, that's how you drank it. Yeah. But I don't really remember drinking the home brew, but I'm sure I did. But I really don't remember a lot about it. But there was no place to cool it, so that's the only way they could drink it, yeah. And of course, by the time we only got electricity out on the farm, I think it was in 47. So up to 47, there was no refrigerators out there.
What was that like, getting electricity on the farm?
Oh, that was quite a change, You could cool things, keep things cold, whatever, but there was no electricity and no telephone, nothing. They used to have telephones way back, and but they soon, during the 30s, they weren't kept up anymore, and they broke down, and there was nothing until I don't know when the telephones came around. A little later than electricity, I think. Yeah, it was later. Yeah, and of course then they were all party line. So.
Can you explain party line?
Party line, you probably had 4 or 5 neighbors hooked on the same line. So if you knew or heard that this phone was ringing, you picked it up and you could listen to your neighbor's conversation, which wasn't good. There was no secrets there. And then a few years later, you got your private lines.
Was anybody nervous about electricity when the farm got wired for electricity?
Well, I don't know. Of course, the towns had it for many years already, so some of the people were kind of familiar with electricity, but the farms didn't have it, The towns had electricity since I can remember, But,
So it wasn't that big of a surprise.
No,
it was just
no.
inconvenience
Yeah,
to have
right,
in the home.
right. It had it out there. So everybody had friends and relatives in town, so they knew about electricity, only the farms didn't have it, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share about alcohol?
Well, I don't know. Not really. I think we said everything there is to.
Say about the alcohol?
The only thing, we can probably have another one.
Do you remember the first car your family ever had?
Well, yeah, I remember the first car. The first car my dad had was a 33 Ford. I remember riding in it and remember it. As a matter of fact, it was still there when I was growing up, and a neighbor bought it, and so it was in the neighborhood for a number of years. It was a 1933 Ford with suicide doors, and then the next car that he had was a 37 Ford, four-door. And then from there on, of course, I drove that little 37 Ford when I was a kid, but the first car that I remember that I really used a lot was a 49 Ford like this. The only difference, it was a green color, and it had 4 doors instead of 2. But I put a lot of miles on this one. Katie should remember some of them. And anyway, but this was the car that I used until we got the 52 Ford as a wedding gift. And then in 62, I bought a pickup. Now this is a 65, but the colors were identical. It was painted the same way, and it was just a few years older, but it looked the same. And then getting into the tractors, like I talked about earlier, D. John Deere on steel. This is what my dad owned, when he started farming. But in the 30s, he had to sell it. There was nothing grew, nothing. There was no use for it, and so he had to sell it. And so he didn't get his first tractor was a little S tractor, Case S tractor. And then, of course, when we started farming over in the Hague, this was my first tractor. It was a WD, Ellis Chalmers WD-45. So we used that, I don't know how many years I was working with this one.
This is
Until
one that you and Katie had on the farm.
This is the first tractor me and Katie had on the farm, yeah. That's what we started farming with. And then grew bigger too, went to this pulled 3 bottoms and a pony drill, while I went to an S case that pulled 4 with pony drill. And then, of course, as time went on, I got into a 40-20, where I could pull 4 with the pony drill. And then, of course, we got bigger and bigger. The last 2 tractors that I owned was 2 44 John Deere's, 4440s, John Deere's. And then getting into toys, this was one of the kids' toys. I restored it after I started the toy collecting. No, this isn't the one. I picked up the wrong one. Anyway, I redid this. I did a farm wall too, but this wasn't the actual one. But this here is one that the kids played with for many years, and then I restored it. The only thing they can reproduce is the body of the tractor. They will reproduce the tractors. Everything that's separate from the body, you can buy and put together, decals and wheels and tires and whatever. So I did a few of those.
Now, with automobiles, gas was rationed in the 40s, and then the 30s were just poor time. Did that affect how much you used the cars?
Well, during the war, gas was rationed. But we always, with agriculture, they needed agricultural products, so it wasn't rationed to the farmers. We could buy all the gasoline we wanted, for tractors, and you used the same stuff in the cars. So we had no problem with gasoline. There was a little problem with tires. I remember tires where rubber was rationed, and you couldn't get a decent tire. They sold a tire that they called synthetic rubber. I know one time we went to Bismarck, had a new tire in the car. It was with the 37 Ford. We went to Bismarck, didn't make it to Bismarck. The tire didn't last to go to Bismarck and back. It blew out, yeah. That's how poor they were, yeah. So you always had to have some old tires to put on to get back home, and so that was poor. Yeah, the tires were really poor. But as far as gasoline goes, we had no problem.
Did you also have those synthetic tires for the tractors as well, or for those that you get rubber?
Well, of course, during the 30s, there wasn't any rubber, but for tractor tires, no, there was no problem. You got tractor tires, yeah, during the 40s, yeah, there was no problem. But the tires, they were a little problem. They rationed them. And then, of course, it wasn't just the tires that were rationed. I still have some old ration books that I saved. I save everything. And where you had to have stamps to buy coffee, to buy sugar, to buy whatever. Yeah, I still have some of those books. And
was there a certain item that got rationed that did affect you on the farm?
Well, I don't think so. Not that I can remember. I mean, as far as they needed the food for the army, and so that came first. The farm production. They needed food for the war effort. So no. As far as farm products go, no, nothing. There wasn't no problem. Yeah.
Now, as a child growing up, you had cars in the 30s. Did you take those cars to town a lot?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Those days things were different, like in the 40s, well, the 30s I don't really remember a lot. See, I was born in 30, so of course my dad had cars. My grandpa never owned a car. If he went out every morning, whatever, when he wanted to go out and help my dad, he'd walk the 4 miles out and back, Yeah, he never owned a car. And but back in the during the war, in the 50s, and grocery stores in town were open till 12 o'clock at night. Everybody went to town on a Saturday night. The whole family, they all got into the car, and that was their Saturday night thing. There was movies, at a theater, where the Blue Room was, they had a theater in there Saturday nights. That was the old Gene Autry and Roy Rogers movies, so we'd go to see them. And so the movies were just weekends. Friday night there was a dance in there. Saturday, Sunday the movies, and during the week there was the weddings. So it was a busy place.
So you did go to town?
Oh yeah, every Saturday night for sure. And sometimes even Wednesday nights was a night where most people come into town, but Saturday night everybody was in town. All the families town was full.
Could you tell the difference between people who lived in town and people who lived in the country? Was there kind of a divide?
Well, I don't know. Not really. We didn't mix like we did. The kind of kids stayed together and the other ones. But being the town kids were in town all the time, you didn't see them downtown on a Saturday night. They didn't come down. It was all country kids that would be together on a Saturday night. Yeah. And, the grocery stores was open till 12 o'clock, and so the women sat in the grocery store and had the conversation, and the men were in the bar.
The kids were at the dance?
The kids were out in the street playing. See, Saturday nights there was movies. There was no dances in town on Saturday night. Not in the 50s, you know. There was movies. There was movies in the theater. Yeah.
And your parents didn't mind you going to movies? They liked
No,
movies
no.
themselves?
Everybody. Well, 10 cents to go to the movie, you know. And no, all the kids were in the movies, you know. Everybody went to town, you know, and they were at the show, you know, movies. There was a lot of westerns then, you know, but there was others, you know. But and then, of course, later on, we got a theater in town, and then they were showing all week, you know, not just weekends. A lot of them. So.
Do you remember the first movie you saw?
It had to be a Gene Autry or a Rogers show, because those were the first ones that were around. Yeah.
Were they your favorite ones? As
Oh
well?
yeah. I still got the bills, you know, where they advertised the movies from way back in the 40s. I still have some of those.
Did your parents collect a lot of things? Where did you decide? Where did you get the knack for it?
I don't know. I just I still have my report cards from school. I have my registration card, my first driver's permit, my first driver's license. I have all that.
Did your mom or your dad collect
Well,
things with
not
you?
really. I don't know. Well, Ma was kind of a collector. She did a little coin collecting, and but I don't know. Not a lot of it.
Did you? Oh, obviously you started collecting your report cards. Did you start collecting
Well,
beer
this
cans and cars?
the beer cans and the cars and the tractors. I got started later. Yeah, I didn't really know, but the tractors, I can tell you how I got started. Our son-in-law Dennis worked for John Deere at Linton, and he came home with when they first started out with collector's items, you know, collector's John Deere's, and he collected a couple of them. He bought at John Deere, and he came home and he said, "Well, I'm not going to get into this. I might as well give them to you." So he gave me those two little tractors. That's what started me collecting. So I've been collecting ever since. And they've been married, 25 years now? So, like I said, I've been collecting about 25, 30 years, yeah. I think he worked at John Deere before they got married, I think. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's what got me started into toys.
Wow.
And then, of course, later I went into cars, and then I went into trains, and keeps going.
Obviously. Are there any other items that you would like to show? You said you had the coin collections. Do you have?
Well, there's coin collection up there. We can probably do that up there. Show you the coins, some of the coins that I do. And other than that, you see, I collect anything. You know, I collect glasses. I like glasses or ashtrays with the printing on of a bar or of whatever. You know, I like to collect stuff that says where it comes from or whose it was or whatever. So I like to collect those, yeah. And of course I've been collecting shot glasses for many, many years. I think I probably have one of every state, everywhere we've ever traveled, Germany and whatever. And then the beer cans, I don't know, when I started them, that was longer than 30 years, I guess. And then I collect signs, you know, there's some old signs. That one there of the Pabst Blue Ribbon there, was a sign that was up in the Hague Bar. And so I've been into that for a long time. So, I don't know. Of course, all this being collected on trips, you know. There's, wherever we've been, I guess, there's something here. And so that's how this stuff collects, you know. This we collected at down in Kansas City, Kansas. There's a museum there that's been there for not too long, but anyway, all the stuff that they show in their museum came off a freighter that came up the Missouri, and it run into a tree, and that's the only way they got the goods from maybe down in St. Louis and into this area is by steamboats, freight out of. And anyway, we were just there the last time we were on the. Let's see, when was that? We were down there. It wasn't on a cruise. About 2 years ago, we were down on a trip down to Branson, and we stopped at Kansas City. And anyway, this steamboat caught a tree and sank in the river, and they couldn't get anything off of it, and so they just let it go. And about 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, there was 2 guys. They knew that this steamboat went down the river. And so they started searching for it. But anyway, the river's course changed, and this ship, they found it finally. And it was like, a mile off where the river was before? And they dug down and found it like 300 or 400 feet under the ground. And they salvaged all the stuff. It was down there and airtight, and nothing spoiled. Everything was just the way it was on the ship. And it got a little, what do you call it, baked onto the goods, but they cleaned it all. And there was, you name it, was on that ship, bottles, glassware, food, you name it. And they've got a whole museum down there. You should see that. It is something else. The guys borrowed some money. At first they wouldn't give them any, you'll never find that ship, and they just didn't give up, and they borrowed, this mortgaged their houses. There's 2 guys, everything to get money. We'll find it, and they finally did. And after they dug down and found it, and then they could get money to build a museum and all that, and now they got this museum there, and they're still cleaning stuff that they took out that they haven't cleaned and put on display. But you should, if you ever get there, you should go and see that. Yeah, it's nice.
You like to travel a lot. Was this something that you wanted to do as a kid?
Well, I don't know. we just started traveling when we were young. Like I said, we went to New York in 1964. We went to New York to the World's Fair. Spent some time there. It was beautiful. That was the first fair, but we've been to a couple of more fairs. We went to the Spokane one, and then we went to the one in Tennessee. Yeah, so, yeah. But we've traveled all the time. Every year we go somewhere. So I've got a sister out in Salt Lake, and we go out there to Vegas. We were to Vegas when Vegas was a little town. And we were there, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And now you can't imagine how big it is. And we go down there a lot, we go to Salt Lake, and from there we'd go drive down to Vegas, and then over into California, and wherever, And through the canyon, we've been down through the Grand Canyon. Like I said, we've hit every state. There's a few to the east that we never got to, but that's maybe about 5 or 6 that I haven't been into. Otherwise, through all the states, all the provinces of Canada except for one. And then to whole Alaska, Canada, a group of us from Hagen, well, there was some sealant guys along too the first 2 years. We went fishing up to Canada for 10 years in a row. Drove as far as, I forget that lake up there now. Anyway, that's as far as the roads would go. Then we'd fly into a fishing camp and fish for 3 or 4 days and then go back home. We did that for 10 years. We had, the first 2 years, we had 2 bushes from sealant along. And Butch, no, not Butch. Yeah, I think it was Butch. Butch and the old man that had the international, I forget his name now, but anyway, me and Hefty went up with them the first year, and then from then on we started going alone. We had enough guys around here that wanted to go, so we'd go either 6 or 12 guys and fish up there, yeah. And then a few years ago I went fishing with Father Leonard here to Alaska. We did some salmon fishing and halibut fishing. That was good.
Take these trips with these German Russians to Alaska.
Well, of course.
When stories start getting told, do you have any favorite stories that you guys tell of?
Well, I don't know.
Get together.
I don't know really, but it was a great time, Of course, you'd fly out to this camp. You had to bring everything along, all your food, for the whole the many days as you were up there. You had to bring everything in, There was, well, towards the end, they would have a little bit of supply out there if you needed something, but there was no electricity out there. There was, nothing, You just had to rough it. But it was fun. I enjoyed it, yeah. And then like I said, the trip to Alaska was, Father's got some relatives up there, see, and he goes up there every year. Still, they're going to go today, this month again, I guess. They're pretty soon, and he's going to go up there this year. So he had some relatives up there that so we were out staying at that camp, and so we had some good housing. We got the best housing. Plus, we were related. The father was related, and he's been going up there ever since. For many years. So that was fun. Halibut. I like to eat halibut. I don't care for salmon that much. They're kind of dry, but halibut. Now, the year I was along, Father caught the biggest one, and it was 150 pounds. But that's not the end. They get up to over 200 pounds. And they're way down. You have to go out. See, the lakes up there in Alaska, they connect to the ocean. And so you have to go out to where the ocean starts, and the halibut are on the bottom of the ocean, see. You have to just take a big old hook and put a little piece of fish on there, and you let it down like 200 feet. And that's where halibut are. And they finally get to that, and they bite, and then you crank them up 150 pounds. Mine was only about 50 or 60 pounds, but Father had that heavy one that year. That's the biggest one I've seen, but they get as big as over 200 pounds, yeah.
Wow.
So, those were the fishing days.
You do still fish from your childhood and on.
Well,
you have kept fishing.
Years ago, Rice Lake that's where I started fishing. It's Rice Lake there by Hague. They had the little bullheads in there, and that's how it started, and it got bigger and bigger, and pretty soon you were out there fishing salmon. Yeah, we've been traveling. We go somewhere every year, yeah. A lot of guys say, I know we had a friend that said, well, I can't go traveling. I have to take my milk cows along. I said, we've been milking all these years. I haven't had one along. You gotta hire somebody to do the milking, And those days it was easier, Everybody milked around there, so we had usually we had Frank Gabriel's daughter. She was a good milker, and she'd come over, stay with the kids, and did the milking and chores, and we went on vacation. anyway, the ones up here are what they call a precision. And a precision, by precision, I'm talking about every spark plug wire, everything that's on the original tractor is on here. It's what they call it a precision made. You know, this is a diesel, every diesel line, so it doesn't have spark plugs. But all these up here are what they call a precision tractor. So every item that's on the original tractor is on these tractors.
All of them for this this section of the
this,
wall.
This section here, yeah, are precision. There's 3 types of toys: precision, shelf, and collector's edition. See, a collector's edition will have on, let's see what's, this is the collector's. A collector's edition will have, now this one has demonstrator embossed in it, but there's others. It'll have a date on there when it came out, and it'll have a date on there, and those are the ones what they call a collector's edition. And then without any imprint on it is a shelf model. This is the 600 series two-wheel drive edition of 1993. So it'll have a date inscribed on it. See, that's what they call a collector's edition. There's only so many made. They make a collector's edition. They make 24 for each dealer in the United States. That's where it ends. That's why they're limited. That's why they call it the collector's edition.
And you have the connection through your through your
Well,
son-in-law.
now, not all dealers would take all their 48 toys, see, but that's what they built, 48 for each dealer. But now Linton might only take 12, see, so the others can go out to other dealers or toy collectors or whatever, you know. So usually you go to a show and whatever, you can buy all these. Or I've got an outfit out in Pennsylvania that I get my stuff from, and I just order them and they ship them to me.
Oh,
Whatever.
So you don't have a problem getting the
No,
collector's edition?
no, huh.
Okay.
For a special thing, like special editions, where they're really limited, and there you have a problem getting one. But they're usually pretty costly too.
So do your kids have dibs on who gets these things?
What's that?
Do your kids have dibs on who gets what?
Oh,
They already started taking claim?
I don't know what's going to happen yet. Well, there's 2 of them that Dwayne down on the farm collects some toys, and then the oldest boy, Gary, collects toys. So there's 2 collectors in the family. But